Yes, hi, thank you. We're getting lots of questions from you about the constitutional issues around this, so we have brought in Hannah White. She is Deputy Director of the Institute for Government and a constitutional expert, so hopefully you can help us navigate this. Parliamentary process has become increasingly important, hasn't it, in recent months. We'll start with an anonymous questioner who asks, can the Queen refuse to grant the suspension of Parliament if approached by the Speaker of the House, or at all, I guess?
So, prorogation of Parliament is a reserved prerogative power of the Queen, which means that technically she could say no, but the strong convention is that she follows the advice of her ministers on this. And I think it would have put her in a much harder situation if the government had been trying to prorogue over the Article 50 deadline, over the 31st of October. The fact that they're proposing a Queen's speech before the 31st of October makes it slightly less political for her, but she'll still not be delighted, I think, to be brought into politics in this way.
What about all the other non-Brexit business that Parliament needs to do? So much time has been spent on Brexit, there must be a backlog. That's a question from Amandeep.
So I think that's right. I think that's the part of the justification that Boris Johnson has made in his letter to MPs today about the need to restart the session. But in practice, it's not just about Brexit, it's about the fact that the government is in a minority in Parliament. It's been very hard to do anything significant on a legislative front without risking defeats. So yes, there's a lot to do, and a new session may help a bit, but even once Brexit is done, the government won't have a large majority, so maybe looking for an election to try to increase that majority and do more on the domestic front.
Joyce asks, could this lead to another referendum on remaining or leaving?
My gut says that what's happened today has made the likelihood of a second referendum less likely.
Why is that?
Just because it doesn't look like there's going to be a time to and a sufficient group of MPs backing that as an option before Brexit is now likely to happen for that to sort of get onto the agenda.
Luke asks, can Jeremy Corbyn hold an alternative Parliament if the Queen has suspended Parliament?
So Jeremy Corbyn can hold whatever meetings he likes. We saw yesterday a group of MPs meet in Church House, which was seen as quite symbolic. And you know, they can meet. Any group of MPs can meet when Parliament isn't sitting, and can hold discussions and can choose to vote. But it won't have any constitutional significance. It might be quite embarrassing, and you know, the news media might be quite interested in it, but it doesn't actually do anything in legislative terms.
An anonymous questioner, if there is a vote of no confidence on the first day of Parliament, will the government still have 15 days to prove its majority? Can the PM still call for prorogation?
So if the Queen says yes to the prorogation in principle that she's being asked for, then the presumption would still be that that would kick in on the 11th of September is the date we're being told. Parliament would have between the vote of no confidence, if it was won, and the 11th of September to try to find a majority for a government, whether that was the existing government or a new government. If they hadn't done that by the 11th, then I think we would be into prorogation and then into an election.
Chris Simon asks, is there any valid reason why the government couldn't wait until after the 31st of October to suspend Parliament for a new session?
I think, you know, the answer to that is they don't want to. This is a political choice. Prorogation is a political choice, and you know, they've chosen the timing of this because they think it best suits what they're trying to achieve.
There is a legal challenge, the SNP talking about a legal challenge in Scotland, and talk potentially of one in England as well to prorogation. What would be the arguments around that?
I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer, but my assumption would be that they would see prorogation as a political choice of the government and not something that it was for the courts to get involved in. But I'm not sure where that Scottish case has got to right now.
And in terms of the position that was agreed yesterday by MPs who want to block a no-deal Brexit, which is for their first choice to be to try to get legislation through Parliament, is there a clear route now with the timescale so constrained?
So the route remains the same. The hurdles they'd have to jump to achieve that remain the same. The time available to do it is now looking extremely tight, particularly once you've taken control of the agenda in the Commons, passed a bill in the Commons, you would then have to get it through the House of Lords, and that, you know, that may just not be achievable by Thursday, a week on Thursday.
They've got John Bercow on side because he said that he thinks this is the wrong move, anti-constitutional, so presumably he will grant MPs the time to at least have the debates that they want and get the ball rolling on that.
I think that's likely. I think it's probably made him feel strengthened in a decision to allow what's called a Standing Order 24 debate, an emergency debate, to make a decision to hand the parliamentary agenda over to backbenchers, if that's what they ask for. I think he'll feel vindicated in making that decision, but he can't control what goes on in the House of Lords.
And of course, the deadline is the 31st of October. The Queen's speech would be on the 14th of October. There is an EU summit on the 16th of October. It's a tight time frame, but we've been here before with the clock ticking to a tight deadline. Would that period afterwards be enough of a window for opposition MPs to block a no-deal Brexit?
Again, it's going to be a really short time window. After a Queen's speech, you normally have 5 days of debate on that Queen's speech, on that legislative agenda, and then you have some votes. By the time that's over and by the time the European Council meetings happened, there's really, I think, only a matter of about a week. So legislating in that time frame, I mean, there would be, if there were majorities who wanted it to happen, I'm not saying it's completely impossible, but it's looking very difficult.
So do you think this makes no-deal Brexit more likely?
It's difficult to say because, there's an argument that if Boris Johnson got a deal at that council that you were mentioning in the middle of October and brought it back, he has a gun to the head of people to say, look, we are going to be leaving without a deal. And then there's a question for the Labour Party, what they do about that. Do they want to be potentially held responsible for us leaving without a deal on the 31st of October, or do they back a deal at that point?
I mean, the withdrawal agreement that Theresa May got could yet be revived, could it even? I mean, even maybe with some minor tweaks.
Well, I think that's the thing. If there's going to be a deal, it's got to be heavily based on that. There's not time to negotiate something significantly different. The question is, can he get enough changes to it that convince enough people that it's sufficiently different that they'll vote for it?
Boris Johnson did, of course, vote for that withdrawal agreement in the end.
As did all but two of his current cabinet. So, actually it wasn't so unpalatable to them earlier in the year.
Okay, we'll have to see what happens. Some more uncharted territory. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.